His name is Anton Chigurh. We see Chigurh first in the hands of a young, unsuspecting deputy. He's been arrested, but he isn't sitting like a man who's been caught. He sits with a terrifying, silent stillness. As the deputy makes a routine phone call, boasting about the oxygen tank he found on the prisoner, Chigurh is already moving. In one fluid, brutal motion, he loops his manacled hands over the deputy's head. The struggle is visceral, the sound of boots stamping against the floor, the casted chair spinning wildly, and then, the sickening snap of a carotid artery. Chigurh doesn't celebrate. He doesn't even look at the body. He simply washes the blood off his wrists with the same cold efficiency he used to take a life. This isn't just a killer, it's a predator that has just slipped its leash. Minutes later, Chigurh is back on the road, using his oxygen tank, which we now realize is a pneumatic cattle stunner, to execute a random motorist just to upgrade his vehicle. He's a ghost moving through the desert, no mess, no hesitation. It's a clean, circular hole in the forehead, leaving a trail of bodies that no one has even found yet. But while Chigurh is the shadow, Llewelyn Moss is the spark that sets the desert on fire. Looking through his binoculars at a herd in the distance, Moss is out hunting antelope near the Rio Grande. But he spots something else, something that shouldn't be there. A group of pickup trucks, abandoned in the middle of the desert. Moss is a veteran, a man who knows how to read the land. He approaches the site with his rifle ready, the sound of buzzing flies filling the air. What he finds is a massacre. Dead bodies are scattered in the grass. It was a drug deal gone horribly wrong. He checks the first truck, the driver is slumped over the wheel, dead. He checks the second if a man is still alive, staring at him with hollow eyes, begging for one thing: water. But Moss isn't looking for survivors. He's looking for the prize. He follows the trail of the last man standing and finds him under a tree, miles away. The man is dead, but next to him is a heavy leather document case. Moss opens it. Inside, stacked in neat rows, is $2 million in cash. In that moment, Moss makes a choice that will change his life forever. He takes the money. He thinks he's being smart. He thinks he's escaped. But as he returns to his trailer and his wife, Carla Jean, the adrenaline begins to fade, replaced by a nagging, lethal sense of guilt. He can't stop thinking about the man in the truck. The man who asked for water. In the middle of the night, against every instinct of survival, Moss grabs a gallon of water and heads back to the massacre site. It's a moment of humanity in a world that is about to become inhuman. But as he reaches the trucks, a pair of headlights appears on the horizon. He isn't alone anymore. The cartel is back, and they aren't looking for survivors. They're looking for their money. Moss is forced to flee into the darkness, splashing through the fast-moving river as men with dogs and machine guns close in. He manages to survive the night, but he's lost his truck, and more importantly, he's left a trail. Enter Sheriff Bell. He arrives at the scene the next morning, looking at the charred remains of a vehicle and the slashed tires. He knows immediately that this isn't a normal crime. He sees the measured nature of the violence and realizes that a storm is coming to his county, a storm that Moss has unknowingly invited into his home. Moss returns to his trailer, bleeding and exhausted, and tells Carla Jean she needs to leave. He's going on the run. He heads to a local store, buying boots and socks because his own are soaked in blood and river water. He thinks he's putting distance between himself and the killers. But Chigurh is already one step ahead. Using a transponder that was hidden inside the money bag, Chigurh is tracking the signal like a bloodhound. He arrives at the motel where Moss is hiding. Moss realizes he's being hunted by something more than just men in trucks. He finds the tracking device hidden in the stacks of $100 bills. He stares at it, the realization sinking in that he's been broadcasting his location every second of every day. He doesn't throw it away. He uses it. He sets a trap at a second motel, waiting in the dark with his pulse steadying. The confrontation is inevitable. Chigurh arrives, following the beep of his receiver. But as he approaches the room, the silence of the night is shattered. The hunter has found his prey, and in this country, there are no second chances. The tension in the motel room is thick enough to cut with a knife. Moss is pinned against the wall, his shotgun aimed at the door, watching the shadow of a man who doesn't even breathe like a normal human. But Moss is a survivor. Instead of waiting for the door to burst open, he's already planned his exit. He's gone through the back window, dropping into the darkness. It's a chaotic, desperate gunfight that spills out into the street. Chigurh is hit, a rare moment of vulnerability for the monster, but he doesn't stop. He retreats into the shadows of a parked car, stitching his own wounds in a pharmacy later that night with the cold, detached precision of a surgeon. Moss, also wounded and bleeding out, manages to stumble across the bridge into Mexico. He tosses the money bag into a patch of weeds near the border, knowing that if he carries it across, he's a dead man. He collapses in the street, eventually waking up in a Mexican hospital, stripped of his boots, his pride, and his safety. This is where Carson Wells finds him. Wells sits at the foot of Moss's hospital bed, looking more like a concerned accountant than a hitman. He offers Moss a deal, give up the money, and Wells might be able to protect him from Chigurh. He tells Moss the terrifying truth: you can't strike a deal with him. Even if you gave him the money, he'd still kill you just for inconveniencing him. Moss, stubborn to the end, refuses. He thinks he can still outplay the devil. But as Wells leaves the hospital and returns to his hotel, he finds the one person he was hired to stop. Chigurh is sitting in his room. The conversation between the two is chilling. Wells tries to buy his life with the location of the money, but Chigurh isn't interested in the cash anymore. He's interested in the principles. He asks Wells a question that haunts the rest of the film: if the rule you followed led you to this, of what use was the rule? The sound of the silenced shotgun blast is muffled by the hotel walls. Wells is gone. The phone rings, it's Moss, calling from the hospital. Chigurh picks up. He doesn't scream, he doesn't threaten. He simply gives Moss an ultimatum: bring him the money, or he will go to the trailer and kill Carla Jean. Moss is no longer just running for his life. He's running for the soul of the woman he loves. He tells Chigurh he's coming for him, but deep down he knows he's invited a demon into his world that doesn't know how to leave. Meanwhile, Sheriff Bell is trailing behind like a man trying to read a book in a language that's being rewritten as he speaks. Bell meets with Carla Jean, trying to convince her to tell him where Moss is going. He's trying to be the protector, the old-school lawman who can save the day. But Carla Jean sees the truth. She knows that even the sheriff is outmatched. Moss, having discharged himself from the hospital, retrieves the money bag from the weeds near the border. He's limping, he's exhausted, but he's still moving. He arranges to meet Carla Jean at a motel in El Paso. He thinks he's finally found a gap in the net. He thinks he's smarter than the cartel and faster than Chigurh. But fate has a way of mocking plans. As Moss waits at the motel, we see a group of men in a truck, the cartel. They didn't need a transponder to find him, they just needed to watch his wife. Back at the office, Bell gets a call. He rushes to the motel in El Paso, his heart heavy with a dread he can't name. When he arrives, the scene is devastating. There's a body by the pool. Another in the room. Bell walks into the room, and for a moment, time stands still. Llewelyn Moss, the man who survived Vietnam, the man who outran the dogs in the river, the man who thought he could outplay the devil, is dead. He wasn't killed by a ghost or a philosopher, he was gunned down in a messy, chaotic shootout with nameless cartel thugs. The $2 million? Gone. Just like that, this hero of our story is erased from the map. But the horror isn't over. Bell sits in his car, haunted by the feeling that he's missed something. He returns to the crime scene at night, drawn back by a sense of unfinished business. He sees the lock cylinder on the door, it's been blown out. Chigurh was there. And for a split second, he senses a shadow behind the door. He's standing inches away from the very evil he's spent the whole movie fearing. He pushes the door open, his hand trembling on his holster. The room is empty. Chigurh has retrieved the money. Bell sits on the edge of the bed, a broken man. But the vent cover is off. He's the sheriff, the law, the protector, and he was standing in the same room as the killer, yet he couldn't see him. The world has become a place where the old rules don't apply, and Bell is finally realizing that he's a relic in a land that has no country for old men. The dust has settled in El Paso, but for Anton Chigurh, the world is still out of balance. He has the money. The cartel is out of the picture. Llewelyn Moss is a memory in a morgue. But there is one final, cold transaction left to complete. Chigurh doesn't forget, and he certainly doesn't forgive. He made a promise to Moss: if the money wasn't handed over, he would visit Carla Jean. To Chigurh, this isn't about spite or revenge. It's about the terrifying consistency of his own existence. We see Carla Jean sitting in her mother's house after the funeral. The grief is heavy, but there's a flicker of something else, a realization that the nightmare hasn't ended just because her husband is gone. She enters her bedroom, and there he is. Chigurh sits in the corner, a dark silhouette against the floral wallpaper, as out of place as a shark in a bathtub. The dialogue here is some of the most chilling in cinematic history. Chigurh tells her why he's there. Carla Jean, showing a strength that Moss never quite found, refuses to play his game. When he offers her the same heads or tails coin toss that saved a gas station clerk earlier in the film, she looks him in the eye and says, "The coin don't have no say. It's just you." She's calling out the monster's greatest lie, that he is merely a tool of fate. But Chigurh won't be humanized. As he leaves the house, we see him check the soles of his boots for blood. The transaction is closed. But even a force of nature isn't immune to the chaos of the world. As Chigurh drives away from the house, moving through a quiet suburban intersection, he is suddenly and violently blindsided. A car streaks through a green light and smashes into his side. It's a moment of pure, unscripted randomness. There's no philosophy behind it, no fate, just two pieces of metal colliding because of a human error. Chigurh climbs out of the wreckage, his bone protruding from his arm, his face a mask of gore. For the first time, he looks mortal. He doesn't wait for the police. He doesn't call for help. He pays two neighborhood boys for a shirt to use as a sling, limps away into the shadows, and disappears. The ghost has been wounded, but he remains at large, a virus that the world can't quite shake. Meanwhile, Sheriff Bell is finished. He sits in his kitchen, the morning sun hitting his coffee cup, talking to his wife, Loretta. He tells her he's retiring. He's a man who has looked into the abyss and realized that the abyss didn't even bother to blink. The screen fades to black. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this cinematic breakdown of fate, greed, and the changing face of evil, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out.